Here we are. Hi, it's Radley Griffin with Griffin Concierge Medical, and it's Mihaela Telecan with healingwithfoods.org here with our weekly low-carb chats. Thanks for having us back. We had to suspend last week because of our friend that came to visit Florida, Hurricane Irma. Thank goodness we're all safe and sound, and we made it through unscathed. There was many families who did not fare so well, and we definitely think about our fellow Floridians and other people throughout the Southeast, and of course over in Texas as well. So, but here we are back, and so welcome. Thanks for being here, Mihaela. Thank you for coming on again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So today we wanted to continue our discourse through the macronutrients. The first macronutrient we discussed was the carbohydrate, and we discussed carbohydrates and how they impact the hormone insulin. Then we moved into protein and why we have protein in our diets. And today we want to talk about the second part of our diet that we're so fond of, the low carb, high fat diet. So we're talking about macronutrient number 3 today, fat. So this is really, I think, come full circle in the past several years. People thought of low carb. Low carb's been around a long time with Dr. It was the notion that it was a high protein diet, and we're trying to educate patients these days that yes, we're still low carb, but we're not necessarily high protein, but we do really want to focus on fats. But Mihaela, won't fat kill me? Won't that just clog my arteries and give me a heart attack? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think there are some fats that can do that. The man-made fats, right?
Right.
The trans fats, which were promoted as the good fats. So what happened, I think for about 50 years, we have this craze of low fat since ancient keys, and maybe you can go more in the details of that came up with this cholesterol heart hypothesis. The more saturated fats and cholesterol you eat, the higher the chances for developing arterial plaque and cardiovascular disease is. So everybody got on that wagon, and including food industry and big governmental regulation with regards to food. So we started this low fat everything, low fat or no fat. So when fat like lard, butter, tallow were removed from our diets, they had to be replaced with something. So they were replaced with vegetable oils, which they are like not only because they are high in the inflammatory fats are not good, but they're highly processed. Like even if you think about extracting oil from corn or from soybean or from give me another example of a vegetable oil, canola.
Oh, correct. Yes.
It doesn't even exist, like the plant or because when you say corn oil, it comes from corn, but what is canola? It's Canada and oil.
I don't know what that is.
It's Canada and oil. It's a man-made name, just like the oil. It's man-made, but I don't want to diverge too much. I talk about a little bit in the book about this. That's why I know, because I did some research.
Right.
So anyway, so we replaced natural fats that come with whole foods, animal foods or plant foods, with man-made vegetable oils that are highly refined, require factories, industrialized factories, raffineries to extract the oil, to deodorize it, to take the color, deodorizing meaning to take the smell, to take the color. So they are odorless, colorless, tasteless.
Right. Could you go so far as to say that the refined oils are equally as dangerous as other refined products, such as sugar, for instance?
Like refined sugar or refined salt. I pretty much everything refined, like what the man takes from a whole food, like eating sunflower seeds is not nearly as bad as taking the sunflower seed oil in large quantities.
Right.
Because it's nevertheless it's a omega-6 fat, which we'll talk a little bit later, some pro-inflammatory fat.
Right.
So that's why when we go with the whole food, we are always better. When the man starts to play with it and it turns it into, is made in a factory, it's food industry, then we have to question things. But now it wasn't bad enough that we have vegetable oils that we cook with, and they are very sensitive to the action of oxygen and temperature because they're polyunsaturated. So their nature is more unstable. So they get rinsed quicker, they have lower smoking points. So when we cook with those fats, they denaturate faster and they cause more oxidation or damage in the body.
Right.
But then we created margarines because we need solid fat in cooking. So man was smart and they started to add hydrogen back to the vegetable fats, because what makes a fat solid at room temperature or saturated is the amount of hydrogen that is present in those carbon molecules that makes the fat.
Right.
So then we make margarines, which is it's a vegetable oil that's saturated, and in that process we created trans fatty acids.
Okay.
And now, maybe 30 years it took us to actually figure out that trans fatty acids are metabolic bombs, literally. Like they are responsible for causing inflammation and damage to the blood vessels and contribute to the formation of the plaque, which the plaque in itself is like a complicated to explain process, but it's the way I see it's like an ulceration that takes place inside the arterial wall, that the body is in a continuous attempt to heal it.
Right.
And in that process of healing, it accumulates all sorts of things in there that include cholesterol and include white cells and muscle cells and all sorts of things, like a bunch, like a big scar that the body is trying to form there.
Right.
And then when the scar is unstable, as it grows, it can rupture and leads to blood clotting or obstruction of blood flow, and that translates in stroke if it's in the brain, or in the heart if it's in a coronary artery, in a heart attack, or it can be any blood vessel in the body, really.
Right.
So let's see, because this was, would fat kill you? To answer your question, it depends on the fat.
Depends on the fat. So I think we can all agree. I think there is, using the word consensus, especially in regards to nutrition, is always a dangerous word. But I think most physicians, nutritionists, those that are paying attention to this would all agree that trans fat is just not a good thing. And so when we say high fat, I think we are agreeing with everyone. We're not saying trans fat. So let's break
vegetable oils.
Right. So when we talk about let's kind of break this down let's break it down on a level that I can understand. So,
sorry.
For me. So we talk about saturated fats. So for when I'm explaining this to a patient, I keep it very simple. And I know there's combinations of saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. So, but as a general rule, saturated fat comes from our animal products, correct?
Plants too, not only animal.
Okay.
So saturated fats are present in all fats. It's the proportion in which, but if we were to isolate the saturated fat, how we recognize it is solid at room temperature.
Okay.
Solid in the refrigerator. So it's not only animal foods like butter or lard or tallow, but plant foods such as coconut oil. Right. And not too long time ago, we had the American Heart Association.
Yeah, we both commented on that.
Exactly. Butchering coconut oil as being a saturated fat. And what comes only from animal foods is cholesterol.
Okay. So
saturated fat is both in plants and vegetable sources of food, but cholesterol is only of animal origin.
Okay. And then we have we call it our healthy fats, and when people healthy fats in a way that sort of, I think, protects us from being fat eaters. Right, so that kind of saves us from being attacked by non-fat eaters. So generally speaking, people think of healthy fats as the monounsaturated.
Yes.
We're trying to include, obviously, we want to include the monounsaturated fats, such as, we all know olive oil as the primary oil there. And we'll talk about some others. So I guess we're trying to bundle in the saturated fats that come from nature in addition to the monounsaturated fats that come from nature that do not need exquisite refining to come up with the end product. We're classifying all of those as our quote healthy fats, correct?
Yes. In fact, if we look at the whole foods, avocado, for example, it's a good source of monounsaturated fat. But I'm not a big fan of avocado oil.
And why not?
It's okay to use it, I guess, occasionally, because it's again a pre-refined product to extract the oil from avocado.
What do you prefer?
For cooking, in terms of saturated fats, because we're talking about heating the fat.
Yeah.
Especially if you cook at higher temperatures, I use coconut oil, butter or ghee. Even ghee better than the other two because ghee doesn't burn as easy. It's clarified butter. All the solids of the butter are removed, so it cooks very well. It's like if you fry an egg, or if you want to, opposed to the new. We have a question. We can address that. So if you want to pan fry something, whether it's a vegetable or a meat, I like ghee for the flavor. I don't mind coconut oil, but I know many people don't like the flavor of coconut on their meat. They may accept it on their vegetables, but not on their meat. So I don't. In fact, the only place I use avocado oil is on my skin.
Oh,
Believe it or not, like a natural moisturizer. I don't really cook with avocado. I eat avocados, but I don't. It's kind of in my mind an all nut, like macadamia oil, walnut oil. All those are refined.
Right.
It's better if you go for the whole food.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's such a great tip. So we have a question here. This is our first time attempting to answer a question in real time. So Dr. McElroy hopefully will answer this to your satisfaction. Doc asks, why is the American Heart Association opposed to the new evidence about saturated fat? So for those that don't know this new evidence that has come out, new evidence is coming out that heart disease and stroke is unfounded as from a result of high fat intake, including saturated fat, but the link is consistent with carbohydrate intake. Mm-hmm. And I was not aware that the American Heart Association came out with a stance, but my instinct tells me that, 3-4 weeks ago, they put out a statement more or less condemning the saturated monounsaturated fat, the coconut oil, and I would suppose that they want to be consistent with their recommendations, and I think that's discouraging. Mihaela, do you have any commentary on the American Heart Association's stance?
What I think is it's very hard for big organizations like American Heart Association or Diabetes Association to just come publicly and say we were wrong for 50 years. It will take a long time for this big ship to turn around. I really do think, and there is more and more evidence-based research that comes and shows it's the inflammation, it's the insulin, it's the fibrinogen, it's so many other factors that contribute to heart disease. It's not a direct link between the amount of saturated fat or the total fat or cholesterol one consumes and the dying of heart attacks. Like even when on autopsies, I mean, this has been shown over and over again. However, I think this gets political. I don't want to get in there.
I think that's a great explanation when you have an organization as large and they recently put out a statement that their own fact finding probably takes a good while to do. So you're right, to move that ship in another direction is just going to take time. But we're holding out hope that we, down here on the ground can start influence ourselves, of course, our patients, continue to see positive data that we're seeing less disease, we're seeing less obesity, we're not seeing the heart disease, we're seeing healing.
Right.
And I think it starts with us. It starts with me and you as practitioners, doing it ourselves, sharing this with our families, to our kids, which is tough for me. So, and then ultimately those that we care about as well, which is our clients and our patients.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to pay attention to what's being said out there in the grand scheme of things, but we're going to keep our eye on the prize. But thank you, Doc, for that question. Very, very good. So one of the things we like to promote is obviously low carb, high fat, and as a byproduct of this diet, people tend to lose weight. Don't you see that? So can you eat fat and actually get lean, get skinny? Is that true?
You can if you drop the carbs.
You have to, right?
Yes. You can't. In fact, what we see, like if we look at the diet of Americans or modern countries that have access to, processed foods, so let's put it this way, we can say that most of the calories are coming from carbs and fat.
Right.
It's not so much from protein. So if you put these two together, especially the refined carbs and the refined fats, it's like recipe for metabolic disorders, for like weight gain and cardiovascular. Like donuts.
Donuts. They're probably the worst food for humans.
It's carbohydrates, deep fried, and
right.
vegetable fats. It's like it's the ultimate perfect recipe for one over time. If you do this occasionally, okay, your body has the resilience to deal with it. But if that's your diet day in, then day out, there's no way around. So yes, we can.
Donuts, the French fries, the you name it.
The typical breakfast is carbohydrate. It's some kind of cereal with, and that's skim milk. So maybe the breakfast is not the better, but the breakfast is a good example of a high sugar load for most people.
Right.
Although some may do sausage and bacon and toast and grits.
Okay.
So carbs and fat together, or carbs alone and later fat. So no matter how we look at it, our diets today are loaded with these two inflammatory and metabolic damaging macronutrients if we put them together. And the type, it's the quality, it's the amount, is the combination.
Now, so we've seen the articles on Time Magazine showing not only the eggs, but the butter. I think this is a very important point. We have to be very clear with our patients. So some will ask me, so I can eat butter now, correct? I can eat eggs now, correct? And I'll say wholeheartedly, I'll say yes, but that's half of the equation. Yes. It's you have to eliminate the refined carbohydrates, the starchy carbohydrates for this to come full circle. So it's just not a matter of saying. It's almost where people are adding in protein to their diet because they feel like they need more protein. Oh, I'm on a high protein diet, therefore I should lose weight because I'm eating more protein. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the case. We have to eliminate the source of that to begin with, which is carbohydrate excess, and then fueling ourselves with an alternative fuel source. So when I explain this to my patients, we talk about the two major forms of fuel that we have as humans are carbohydrate burning or fat burning. And you and I, we talk about the ketogenic state is basically being in a fat burning state. We're burning fat from the foods that we eat. And then when we run out of those fuel sources, our body will seek to burn the fat in our stores. Is that a correct analysis of how the process works?
Yes, in the absence of carbohydrates or in the absence of food altogether. So two things will help someone become more of a fat burner versus carb burner. Right. It's either abstinence of food from food, like fasting, or low carb. So when you make your main carbohydrates green leafy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables, and you eliminate all the other carbs, including fruits, like we talked, I think it was last time or two times ago, and it's the fate of the fat that you eat with those carbs, the non-insulinogenic carbs, is completely different than the fate of the fat that you eat with the potato or the rice or the pasta or the even quinoa or the sweet potato. Somebody asked last time, what about sweet potato? It's better than French fries. It's unless you fry it and make it sweet potato fries, but it's nevertheless a starch.
Point. So, for instance, if I'm eating a low insulinogenic meal, kale or spinach or something along those lines, I am consuming carbohydrates, sure, but I'm not having the same insulin response. So for me to gain energy from carbohydrates, I need insulin to increase in my body to take that fuel to my tissues.
Yes.
When that doesn't happen, then I can focus in on the oils I'm having in my either my salad or the fats from the meat that I'm eating, the egg, the bacon, the salmon, and my body will use those triglycerides from those foods as fuel, and that will circulate all over my body. So you're suggesting, though, that when I combine French fries or the oils with the carbohydrates, my insulin will rise. I will take those carbohydrates to my tissues for fuel. And those fats that come with that meal, what happens to those? Those are they in limbo? They circulate in my body as triglycerides, correct?
And then, thanks to insulin, they will be stored as fat. Those fats, and some of the carbohydrates, if not all, will also be converted into new fat. Is the de novo lipogenesis. Not only the fat from the meal gets stored because you can burn it in the presence of insulin.
Right.
But some of the carbohydrates, if they're in excess, if you're sitting at your desk or lying down, if you're not purposefully engaged in some kind of intense physical activity or even brain activity, once the glycogen stores are filled, so you can't have any more reserves, then you have to put in the other reserves, which are the fat reserves. So even the carbs from the French fry or the potato or the pasta will be stored as fat. So that's how over time people start to accumulate subcutaneous fat and worse so visceral fat inside the abdominal cavity. And that's why measuring waistline is such a great indicator of metabolic health.
Absolutely. Well, this has been really terrific. So I think one of the take homes for our folks today, and we're going to provide information in the comment section on looking at the fats we've discussed, what you and I consider good fats, the importance of that this diet is a combination diet. It's low carbohydrate with high fat. It's not high carbohydrate, high fat.
Yeah.
It has to be done correctly, or the results. It's important for people to know that if you're consuming even with a high fat environment, the body preferentially, as a reminder, preferentially burns carbohydrates and it won't burn fat. And of course, our body will store the excess. I think that's a very, very important for all those out there who are learning for the first time that these fats are, they've been told all of these fats for their entire life are dangerous, that they're clogging. I would encourage folks to, keep an open mind. We don't want to kill ourselves, so we definitely don't want to kill our patients. Those things that we're following, we're seeing the results in our own lives. And I think that's so important. And not to say if data changes, I would like to think that we would change as well, should we be proven otherwise. But so far in my practice, I'm proven right again and again and again, promoting this lifestyle. And I think, Mihaela, you could say the same thing with your clients as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering if you want to make a comment about the arterial plaque. You guys are doing a test that's even maybe better than the calcium score that can show over time changes in the plaque, or
Yeah, so what we're doing here with Tampa at Harrison Cardiovascular Center and Memorial Hospital, and a lot of centers throughout the U.S. are doing this. So basically, we are now scanning, and this information has been around a long time. We're using CT scanning, computed tomography scanning, inside the chest cavity and analyze the vessels of the heart. And the very early form of this testing was called calcium scoring. Mm-hmm. So what that would mean is we would send the patient through the CAT scanner, and the radiologist would then be able to circle how much calcium had been collected or accumulated on the person's heart or vessels or coronary vessels. So calcium, for those that don't know, is a sign of healed plaque or an area that's been damaged, and now it's healed and it turns to a scar in the form of calcium. And it was considered a really terrific way to screen somebody for heart disease. So if someone had old scar or old plaque, well, that's a good indication that they. The problem with that is that plaque formation is evolving, and old plaques will heal and new plaques will form. And what we were running up against was the occasional patient who had what we call a soft plaque. So a soft plaque has no calcium in it, but it's the most dangerous form of plaque. So it's a plaque that continues to, it's an area of the vessel that's injured. As you explained earlier, the body continues to try to heal that area using cholesterol. Our body uses cholesterol to help heal our vessels. Cholesterol is not a bad word. It's a bad word if we damage it ourselves. and we used, speaking of Hurricane Irma, if we're trying to heal our homes, we don't want to use damaged materials to heal fix our homes. But that's what we're doing when we're in a poor metabolic vessels, and then we also injure the cholesterol that is responsible for healing, and that creates and our body doesn't like that, and it creates an immune reaction, and then ultimately a plaque. So these plaques can rupture, and these are what we know in the everyday life. We call them the widowmaker. It's one of these plaques that pop open like a pimple on the inside of the artery, a clot forms. So this newer technology, and it's not terribly new, more than a decade, we're using the same premise of the calcium scoring, but we're actually injecting a contrast dye into the vessel and actually lighting up the arteries to see if we can identify those plaques. And the reason this hasn't been embraced more widely is that there has been a cost associated, a big cost associated with this test. And there's also radiation exposure as well. Whereas the calcium scoring has a low cost and there's a low radiation. And the radiation is almost as equal to a traditional coronary calcium score. And the cost here in Tampa, we have it for $195. Which is, gosh, I mean, that's cheaper than a colonoscopy. It's on par with a mammogram. And that's really what we're trying to do now with heart disease. We're trying to identify whether or not a person has plaquing in their arteries, as opposed to guessing. We use these in the past. We've used things like family history, smoking history, blood pressure. And we're trying to assess risk. How risky is that person to develop heart disease? And if they're more risky, maybe we'll go send them through a stress test to see if we can make create the environment where it appears as if they have a blockage. Well, now using that same doesn't make sense. We just go look inside the breast and see if there's cancer. We look inside the colon to see if there's Well, let's look inside the coronary arteries to see if there's plaque, and that helps us determine, do we need to put a person on a statin therapy, which has side effects? Do we care that their cholesterol is 350? It helps us determine what do we care about in regards to treating our patients, not just blindly putting a patient on a medication out of a so specific with our patients. I recommend every man over age 40, over age 50, and
For
earlier
women over age 50.
Women over age 50, men over age 40, and earlier for men and women alike if they have significant risk factors, diabetes, case recently where, and even the metabolic physicians, we have to really pay attention to the subtleties of Rome. And it case can sometimes, we had a patient recently who had with a ruptured plaque, someone we heard about here in Tampa. So it's the idea, I don't know that we would have caught that one in our practice, but we are trying to screen patients earlier so they're not that, oh, my friend, a massive heart attack. So we have the technology now, and we're just trying to utilize it to our advantage moving forward. So that's what we're doing here.
That's good. That's good.
So let's show our viewers our website, Healing with Food, conciergemedical.com. Topics that we can discuss in the future. We can talk about coronary scanning in the future. I know we haven't touched on fasting just yet. I love fasting and the effects of that. But if there's anything you would like to see or hear about, and we thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.